All right, everybody. I think we're gonna get back. I hope everybody has had a quick moment to have a little bit of a break, a little bit of a recharge. This has been quite an amazing last couple days, and a little bit more in focus here. There we go. All right. I think we're back. Just want to thank. Okay, so I just want to thank everyone for attending. This has been just an amazing last couple days. Again, hundreds of hours that were put to make this happen. All volunteer run group, the community of people that came together, led by people with lived experience, centering the experiences of people living in vehicles, bringing that to educate people who are currently operating or want to operate, say, parking programs or parking programs in the general. Parking program providers themselves bringing that information to share with each other, policymakers, legal advocates, researchers coming together. I mean, I know that was the plan, but I've never seen anything like this, and that was pretty cool. And so I'm just so excited that this was that it was successful. To be honest, that you all attended. We had such an amazing turnout, particularly as an inaugural event. I mean, wow, that was exceeded all of our expectations. Absolutely. I just want to again thank you all for attending, for sharing your experiences, for sharing your knowledge with each other, for leaning in with your hearts, for leaning in with your intellect, for leaning in with your own experiences and being vulnerable, because sometimes it's hard to share those stories, and sharing those stories is what changes us, is what tells other people that, again, that they're not alone. And it's what also helps to bring about a paradigm shift for people who don't know your stories, who got to hear these for the first time, who got to hear how people are using their vehicles as a positive response, as an adaptive strategy, as a preferred way of life, and what sort of things that we need to protect the rights of people who are living in vehicles wherever they may be, whether that's in an urban setting or a rural setting or in a suburban setting, whether that's out in the middle of the BLM areas or deep inside the city industrial zones. We want to work together as we move forward into the next year. We want to continue this work. And before we talk about that, I want to specifically thank several people who helped to bring this all together. We've been meeting, as we mentioned at the beginning, as work groups throughout this last year with people who are living in vehicles, people who are developing parking programs, and people who are legal advocates. And we also have had specifically a summit planning group that's been meeting, well, at first once a month, but over the last several months, I think actually about once a week or once every other week, and have put just considerable amount of time into making this happen. I want to specifically thank some of our plenary speakers, Bob Wells, as well as Dee Powers. I want to thank Sue Ann Carlson and Phyllis Bickford from the Home on Wheels Alliance. Remember, many of these people are members of our Summit Planning Committee. Jake Hoster, Bill Sweeney, Karina O'Malley, Tim McCormick, Nitan Shanas, who was one of our early admins, as well as Amy Rodriguez, who did such a great work in helping us to bring this together. Jamie Restorff, Marika MacArthur, who stepped in at the last moment to make this all possible. Marika, I want to give you a personal extended shout out and a round of applause, because Marika is the one who helped to set up so much of this Zoom stuff. She was the one who was the technical support person in the background who make this all work. And Marika, we wouldn't have had this possible without you. So thank you. Thanks,
Marika. I just want to actually say, you don't even know the technological nightmare that almost befell you before Marika came around to really get our ducks in a row. So huge thank you to Marika. I thought this was a very smooth tech conference, and that is all credit to Marika. And thank you to Phyllis also, and to Hawa for enabling us to have this Zoom technology so that we could have this virtual summit.
Absolutely. And specifically from the organizational support. I know I've mentioned them so many times, but the Home on Wheels Alliance really stepped in here. Marika actually works with Hawa, and they reached out to connect us with Marika to help do this work. The support of Home on Wheels Alliance was just absolutely essential to make this work. In addition to Tristia Bauman, our colleague with the National Homelessness Law Center. They also contributed a significant amount of resources to make this happen. And my employer over the last 2 years, though I am not employed with them anymore, I was in the middle of a postdoctoral program at the University of California, San Francisco with the Benioff Homelessness and Housing Initiative. And I want to specifically thank all of my colleagues there. And particularly the director of that program, Margot Couchel, Dr. Margot Couchel, who helped support this work and my sort of, I don't know if it was volunteer work because I frankly was being paid by them, but I asked that, when asked what I wanted to do with that time, I said that no uncertain circumstance, that what I wanted to do was to do this work, and they supported that work. And so anyway, I thank you everybody for being part of this great work. We have crossed that finish line. We did it. This was the first ever National Vehicle Residency Summit. It was an amazing event with just incredible information that was shared. I hope you all got something out of it. We would love to learn more from you. And I think we're actually going to send out an email to learn more about maybe what we could do better, what we might want to add next time. If you have any suggestions, we want this to be an organic group that continues to grow and build on the work that we do. And in that vein, this panel, this final plenary is really going to be talking about where we go from here. Our goal in 2022 was to do this summit, as well as to share information across our working groups. Now that we crossed this line, what does 2023 look like? We've talked about that we want to have a self-sustaining organization. That may mean developing it as a 501c3 or working with an existing 501c3, or maybe not 501c3 at all. We want the community that brings this, that is already doing this work within this collective, to help define what this collective is moving forward. These are big questions, and we don't expect to answer them here today, but we want to start the conversation, and we're going to continue it throughout this year and into next year. Realistically, we'll probably be able to answer these questions right around the end of the first quarter of next year, because we want to be able to give it time. But we're hoping to right around that time to actually have real governance in place that we can move forward as to receive funding, to expand this work, to raise the public awareness of vehicle residency, and to add on other work we can do, whether that's research or public awareness campaigns or whatever it might be. But again, that's where we ask you as our collective to help to define that work. And with that said, I'd like to turn it over to our colleague Tristia Bauman.
Hi, thank you so much, Graham. I want to echo thanks to everyone. But before we start talking about what's coming next, I want to provide really special thank you to Graham. Graham is the visionary behind today. And a lot of people have provided input and made today what it is. But years ago, Graham and I had a conversation where he described for me a vision of a National Vehicle Residency Collective. It didn't have that name at the time, but a way for people to come together, vehicle residents primarily, but also people who are allies, needed supporting allies to be able to achieve the types of changes in society that vehicle residents need and that we all need in order for people to be able to live full lives where dignity, liberty, and freedom are core values that are protected and honored and respected. You all deserve that. All people deserve that, and that was the spirit in which the collective was born. Graham has spent so much of his professional life, developing expertise on this issue, and has been one of the key coordinators. And through his relationships, was able to bring in invaluable help and support from groups like HAWA. I see in the chat, a mention of deeper connection with HAWA, and I will tell you from my own perspective, I think that would be a brilliant, wonderful thing, as it would be for all of us to bring our networks together in the collective. So just a couple of framing things as we think about moving forward. I'm going to talk about concrete action steps that emerged from the conversations that we had, but there are also questions that aren't answered today and that could never be answered even by Graham, and certainly couldn't be answered by a small group of us. This is a collective. it is intended to be a community, and it needs to have governance that is of, from, and by the community. There are ways that we have operated over the last year. You've heard us describe it. For example, we've had a series of working groups. They've been 3 working groups. We've called them our lived experience working group. That's where vehicle residents have come together. Our legal working group, where attorneys, mostly litigators doing mostly federal lawsuits, have come together. And then we've also had a service providers working group, where it's primarily been service providers that offer parking program services. Those are, the working groups that have existed in 2022. Will those be the working groups in 2023? That's going to be up to the collective. Graham and I have played a coordinating role, meaning, sending out and admittedly on my part, not always in the way that provided the most clear information about when and where, but there were a lot of meetings, a lot of coordination, a lot of things that were developed, over the course of this last year. There's language that has been developed collectively. That's what you're going to read on vehicleresidency.org. What is described about the collective was what the members said, this is how we want to talk about ourselves. And because we're a community, that is an evolving process. This is a living, breathing community. And, Graham and I recognize that, well, I'm going to speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for Graham. I will say that I am an ally to vehicle residents. I've played a coordinating role, and that has meant that I've had some amount of power in terms of how decisions get made, what occurs. That is not the way that the collective should move forward. In my vision, I can have power and decision making and organizing role in the legal working group. But this is a collective that is for vehicle residents, and that should be by vehicle residents. So the leadership in 2023 is going to look different than the leadership in 2022, because this is your community and we're here to support you. So we have now, come up with a thing. There's a thing. There are working groups. There's listserv. There are there's a membership agreement. There are resources that we've started with. We now have a summit where a lot more people know about the issues that we talked about. Have the collective. And, there is a path forward. We want to keep this momentum going and marshal the energy that has been developed and really, infused these last couple of days to move the collective forward in a way that is led by vehicle residents with the support of Graham, myself, and others. So I have a couple of slides here. Me and my slides. Okay, hold on one moment. Let me get this the way that I should have it. Okay.
And while you're doing that, somebody, Peggy Lee had asked a question. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for your kind words, Tristia and everyone. You all got me all misty-eyed over here. It's just been an honor to work with you all. Peggy Lee asked a question about do we have a guiding principles? Yes, we do. I'm not sure if it actually is in the terminology of guiding principles, but we did develop a mission statement and general guiding principles when we first started last year. But that's part of the thing that we want to talk about again, because we developed it sort of with people living in vehicles leading that conversation, but that was just the start. And we want this to be an organic and growing process.
That's great. Thank you. And thanks for that question. Please do keep the questions coming in the chat. To be perfectly frank, I think this is a great time for there to be a lot of questions. And I don't mean just this moment, but I mean this period in the collective. This is a community that has existed in other spaces. In this particular space, it's really just been born, and how it develops is going to be something that is decided by you all with our support moving forward. So a few things that I just wanted to call out that were raised over the last couple of days as we think about kind of concrete action items for moving forward together. One, the issue of working groups was raised. We've had specific working groups. I named them. Some folks were asking, well, I'm interested in legal advocacy, but I'm not a lawyer, or I'm a law student. Can I be in the legal working group? Or I know a lot more about these, towing hearings and the arguments than any of the lawyers that I've ever spoken with. Can I be part of the legal working group? The legal working group, as we've had it, has been exclusively attorneys, and there's good reason for that. On one level, one is that it is a group that's also part of the Housing Not Handcuffs Justice Network, where there's a lot of confidential case conferencing information. And for reasons of confidentiality, it is a different form of communication just under law as between other attorneys who've entered into a confidentiality agreement than when that same agreement is entered into with non-attorneys. And Graham and I, spoke about this. It may be that the legal working group as its function in 2022 is not how we should be moving forward in 2023. Maybe this the working group in 2023 would be just on the legal side would be like a legal advocacy group or a law and policy group. There's no reason to limit how access to legal information is provided. And we could have still space for that type of case conferencing that does have implications of confidentiality, but make even more space for the larger legal advocacy, questions. So I say that, as an example of how we can reform the way that we've done working groups in a way that makes sense for this collective, and ultimately the decisions are going to be what this collective wants to do. We can think about governance processes, how we as a large diverse group of people decide which way we want to go as between two options. There are survey instruments, other things like that we can use. But I do want us to think about what are the working groups that we need, that we would want to be part of. And that is, the task of the collective coordinators is to bring that to bear and to provide that space for that. So be thinking about working groups. What do we need to change in 2023?
Tristia, I'm sorry. I noticed that actually there's been several comments that have come up in the chat specifically about that, and it relates to the conversation that we were having yesterday, actually, that you just talked about, and this idea about having an advocacy group that really sort of maybe. And it's something we could talk about going forward, but that brings together the three working groups specifically around advocacy, so that the legal groups may still be able to talk about confidential legal actions, because they have to be able to maintain the confidentiality of their clients and their cases, but at the same time be able to work with those lawyers around public awareness campaigns. How do we advocate for the rights of vehicle residents, for the human rights movement, and on the larger scale? So so everything you're saying in the chats, and several people have said that, we're all on the same page. You're reading our minds.
Oh, great! I'm very happy to hear that. That the last thing I'll say before moving on from working groups is, they can be reshaped in any way that makes sense for this community, and that'll be based on what the community wants. But that what Graham calls cross-pollination, breaking down silos, ensuring that people from, different kind of areas of expertise can all come together in the same space so that they can share information, kind of in the way that we've done here at the summit. So, advocacy groups, other ways to move forward together through a working group model is one of the things on the horizon for 2023. Please go to vehicleresidency.org, click the join button, let us know that you want to be part of the collective, and you'll get information about working groups, what to join, how to join. You'll also get information about leadership and governance in 2023. Those are things where there's some structure built. We've talked about a general mission. We've got some core values, like, for example, around respectful communication with one another, which was really excellently demonstrated in this summit. Those are things that we'd want to keep, but leadership and governance, we really don't have systems in place for that now. And, it is a process that needs to be done. It needs to be accountable, and it needs to be, credible and, authentic, and what you want as members of the collective. So, it's that is work. I'm just going to be really transparent. It's work. One of the things that we discovered in 2022 is even simple kind of decisions can become really struggles to make in a timely way because you want to value everyone's opinion, but at some point you need to make a decision. I'm not going to pretend that in 2023 leadership and governance structures are just going to magically emerge and it won't be a lot of work. It's going to require real thoughtful thinking, respect and trust for one another, and a desire to see this collective thrive. But we absolutely can get to a world where this is a vehicle resident led membership organization where you have allies at your disposal to help move you forward. And so that's another action item that you can take again by clicking that join button on the website. There's also I know I'm talking too long. I'm always so long-winded, I apologize, but a couple other things that I just want to mention that emerged from the first day is connecting community members. So, somebody raised in the chat the idea that we should have a way where we can, connect with one another. And there are ways that we are doing that within working groups now, an email listserv. But there are other ways that we might want to be in touch so that we can, provide action alerts to folks, get people and recruit them into our own networks that are relevant to vehicle residency or to human rights work. I'm going to use the kind of broad framing of human rights work for all of the other kind of related work that we're doing around human dignity and housing and liberation and the other things that we're working on that intersect in our discussions of vehicle residency. And we should be able to support each other in doing that. So, let's connect with each other, let's join each other's networks, let's sign each other's, advocacy letters, and we will be in touch with ways that you can get in touch with fellow collective members. But, this is a space for that type of collective movement building and power building. Other things that came out of today's conversation that I want to just call out, and these are just a few things that came out, but moving forward together, media, speak up and speak out. I mean, that was a theme really in every single session. There are a lot of people putting false messages about vehicle residents in the media, and that's really all forms of media. And these are funded, coordinated groups that generate ignorance and bigotry in the general population and in lawmakers. That has direct impact on everyone's lives and on the vehicle residents' lives in particular. So what we need to do is counteract those messages. And there are a lot of ways we can do that with traditional media sources, social media sources. We need to speak up, speak out. And one thing for the allies that I will say is we cannot pretend to be experts. Let's not be the messengers when we're not the best messenger. If there is a reporter like Thatcher Schmid who's asking for stories of vehicle residents, it should not be me or you who is telling that story. It should be vehicle residents who are telling that story. So, an action item that might come out of the collective is having a media list, a speakers bureau or something. I don't know what we call it, but a group of go-to folks who are interested in telling their stories, and not to do it in a way that is designed to put emotional labor. This came out as an excellent point that was made, to put emotional labor on people to educate, allies, so that we can take those stories and move forward in our work better. But to provide access and lanes when we have the ability to do that, when we have the privilege to do that, to the people who are best able to advocate for themselves, tell their own stories, to make that space and to really be deliberate about that. And that's another action item for the collective. Another thing that was mentioned is resource banks and trainings. So we're going to put all the great information that we collected over the summit onto the vehicleresidency.org website. We'll get that up as soon as we can. But there may be, things that you can do around trainings, for example, how to document evidence for legal and policy advocacy was one of the ideas that came out of a discussion session today. The working group sessions, that's a great forum for trainings. And, those are some of the ways that they were used in 2022. So that can continue or adapt in 2023. funding for community alternatives to towing vehicles and for trash collection. You know, what can we do? How can we leverage funders or use like crowdsourcing in order to pay for the type of support that we know is needed, but that is, you know, not being funded by governments and by other private entities. And then, you know, the idea of task forces also came up as an example of a tactic where you can advocate for a task force to inform policy. And this is just one example of how you can help inform policy. But it's really key that primary representation be from, this is always going to be the case, but be from the people who live the policies, who know the most about what the policies are, and who need to be at the forefront of designing what the policies should be. And there are a lot of ways that you can do that. So, you know, these are just a couple of examples. I'm gonna stop talking, stop sharing my screen, but please do take action. And the easiest one that you can do is click that join button on vehicleresidency.org.
We've got some just great conversations going on in the chat. This is all so helpful. It's all so positive, and we're going to be saving these chats. This is part of it. This is exactly what we're trying to bring out. There's a lot of great, you know, and contentious, I wouldn't say contentious. There's a great conversation about the term vehicle residency and vehicle homelessness, and is there a distinction here? And I think it was Brian who said that we're all on the same team and we help each other regardless of choice or being forced into this. I personally like to see it from that perspective. I like the big tent perspective that Bob described from the day one, and honestly, I think it was my experience has been particularly with people living in cities. I come from the background of working with people who are considered vehicular homelessness. One of the things that I found in coming out to the Home on Wheels Alliance Rubber Trap Rendezvous was meeting people who lived in the cities and came out to that event, who would be called homeless in the city, and yet out at that event, they were able to say, "This is my home." And other people said, "I love your home. Let me see your home." And it showed me that I think that the term homeless can deny the capacity for homemaking. People make homes. I think it was Tim who had spoken about this. Several people spoke about this. It is core human behavior to make homes, and your homes should be valued for what they are. They should be brought in and respected, and they should not be stripped away from you. And I just want to be very, I think I don't want to get in any kind of contentious thing here. The point is that I think we want to be as inclusive and focused on protecting the rights of all people living in vehicles, as Brian, you said, regardless of choice or whether they are enforced into this. But that's just my opinion, and I'm open, obviously, to the conversation as we move forward into 2023. Sorry, there's so many comments I'm trying to catch up with. These are great. And I also want to recognize our time. Well, we actually have about a half an hour left, so we're good. So do we want to open up questions? We can, Tristia, what do you think is our best way to do this so that we can, you know, maybe, or we could ask you some questions of the group too.
Yeah, you know, one thing that I would love, Marika, if we're able to do this, would be to maybe stop the spotlight so that we can have the community on the main screen, and we can see each other and start asking each other some questions, or providing reflection. You know, we've got just under half an hour of the second day of the summit, and we'd love to hear from you all.
Yeah.
Tristia, there is a polling function in Zoom. And if you would like to take a poll, like how many people that are present are currently full-time vehicle dwellers, or whatever, any sort of thing that you'd like to poll.
Yay. Okay, so you are seeing in real time what Phyllis has consistently done, which is educate me about functionality and you know, help make this a great experience. Now, Phyllis, is it something that I would, because I love that question. I would love to know that.
I think we should ask Marika if she knows how to do polling and what you would do.
I don't see, I'm not sure I have it enabled for this meeting.
Oh, okay, never mind then. Next time, something to
Well,
look forward to.
Well,
maybe,
we could ask people to raise their hands. We could do,
Yes.
or people to write it in chat. And I actually, I actually have a couple of questions that I'd love to ask people in addition about the summit, because I'd love to know, first off, but let's do this question first, because I'd like to get some feedback on how we can improve this summit too going forward. But first off, does anybody in chat, how about the best way to do it is, if you are living in your vehicle, and we don't have to share this, I guess, I don't know if everybody can raise their hand. Is that possible?
there's the virtual hand, which you can
Hmm.
access by going to reactions. And then there's a bar where it'll say raise hand. There's also your physical hand if you want to put your self on video, or if you'd prefer to use the chat, you can, drop something in the chat. But it would be great to know how many people in this audience are vehicle residents, and I think current or former vehicle residents.
I raised my hand because I wanted to comment on that, because I don't know who all the people are in.
Oh, you
would
muted.
be,
Oh, there we go. You're back.
Oh, sorry. Because I'm in the city of LA, I think that it's an issue of persecution. So, because I don't know who's all in this group. I just wanted to say that. I didn't raise my hand for saying I was in or out or anything. Okay.
Yeah, and I really thank you, Peggy, for saying that, because actually that was one of my concerns too, was about people saying this in here and possibly exposing themselves to future risk, and that's of course not what we want. That's never the goal of this group. So we do actually, a lot of people did raise their hands, and we do see that there's a considerable amount of people who are in this group or have lived experience with vehicle residency. Maybe we could follow up with an email that's from the actual collective, so that we can make sure that it's not publicly shared. But interestingly enough, when you all signed up, one of the things that we saw, because we asked, if people had experience or what you all know, you all saw that thing or the questionnaire. About 1/3 of people who signed up did have direct lived experience as vehicle residents, and so I think it was about 150 people or something. Jake could probably say better, but I believe that's what the number was.
I cannot access the numbers in the heat of the moment.
No worries. If I remember right, it was around that number. But actually, that was an early number before the numbers ramped up, so we'd have to see in the end. But it was a pretty considerable amount of this group. But so I had a question too for the group. I would love to know.
Are we finished counting? Can we put hands down?
Yeah, is that okay with everyone? Okay. You can lower your hands whenever you want, no problem. I do have a question for the group, and I'm wondering, from the perspective of coordinators at this summit, I would love to know if there's anything that you found particularly useful, that you thought was a good takeaway, or something that you would like to take forward that you want to highlight. And that's sort of my first question. And then I have a follow-up question, was kind of the opposite of that. Are there any opportunities for us to build on? What do you think we should do differently next year? What are, again, additional sessions we should talk about? And if you want to post these in chat, by all means do so. Or if you'd like to raise your hand and speak up, we can do that as well. Raise and lower hands, you just click on the reactions and you'll see raise hand, and then you can lower it from there. But I think all the hands are now lowered.
Yeah, on the first screen. If it's helpful, we can throw out some topics for quick feedback. This was a virtual summit, 5 hours a day, and that's a lot. That's a lot of Zooming. And I'd love to get sort of the quick takeaway on that. Did we think that this was a good amount of time, 2 days, 5 hours each, given that it's a virtual summit? And I see Bill's hand is up.
Climbing ladders is too dangerous.
Thanks. One of the things I would appreciate for advocacy would be because so much involves law and law is so crazy different. I would like maybe that we can be paired by state and then nationally. So we'd have two advocacy groups we could be part of. One is national, one would be our state. And just have a way to connect with each other if people want to be divided that way. I mean, always voluntarily. I don't want people just unwillingly put into some category, but that could help us a lot. I know in Washington State, it could help a lot.
That is great. I'm making a note of that. And, you know, that is exactly the type of feedback we want. It looks like we're getting other feedback in the chat about topics, working groups. You know, some of that I think we can, in the follow-up, provide some information about how we might be able to make that happen. Volunteer opportunities is another thing I'm saying. Regarding the length of the conference, I saw some info in the chat. And then Glenn, you have your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to address the one thing that has bothered me for the last 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours. Pardon me while I turn off the TV that's been playing in my background here. I was told that I would, if I missed something, I could go back in a week or so and to the website, and I'd be able to see all the videos and all the chat and everything that I didn't get the chance to see. And then I was told that somebody or some group voted not to record their video, so I won't get to ever see that. Whatever it was, I will never get to see it. And that bothers me, to be told at the beginning that I would see everything and then be told afterwards that there's something that I can't let you see because you're not special enough. You weren't there when it happened. So I'm sorry, it just irritates me to no end.
Well, then,
Thank you, Glenn.
yeah, Glenn, I'm the one who owes you an apology about that. You know, the intent is to provide as much recording resources as we've amassed during this summit. So there are a couple things that I want to note. One, in the conversational sections, when we were talking about sensitive issues, either that might expose somebody to risk or that are especially vulnerable topics. There were, you know, 2 sessions that I participated in where there was not recording. It was a choice made by the group, but it was, you know, something that that I suggested. So I am, you know, I apologize, but please know that it has nothing to do with a value statement about you. It really was about, you know, the community of people who were engaged in that discussion and the topics. There may also be, and I'll just flag for everyone, you know, where you've seen me struggle in real time with just even like getting my screen shared. So just know there is a possibility that there are chats that I didn't accurately save, or, you know, links that I didn't get. You know, we're a team of volunteers. I think we've done a really good job of collecting a lot of the materials, and we're going to get them up as soon as possible. But I'll bet you everything that I've got that there are going to be some things that will be missing. And you know, I appreciate everyone's patience with that, and that's a thing for us to aim to do better in future, Glenn. So thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I know there are people out there that possibly might say something. I'm never going to tell you anything about my specifics. I might tell you what I might do in a given situation, but I'm never going to say this is my bank account. Or this is the guy that attacked me when I was a child that has made me wary of everybody, every male I've ever met. You know, it's a great thing. I mean, that y'all did all this for all of us. And I'm looking forward to seeing what is published in a week or 2.
Wonderful. Thank you, Glenn. And we will have a lot of great information that's there. And you know, that's, I think, a thing that we can manage better moving forward is we can be really explicit about where we'll be recording, what would be publicly available versus what would be the more private spaces that you all would be invited to join, but that wouldn't be recorded and put on a website. Is there other feedback, I see, you know, I know I saw a few hands and I apologize for missing people. Peggy, I saw your like actual hand go up. Peggy.
So, okay, the first day I was able to basically listen to everything and be there. But today we ran our legal, unhoused legal citation clinic, right? So it was kind of crazy trying to listen in and participate because we were out on the Venice boardwalk. It's really noisy. But the first part was really cool before our clinic started because I had some people with me that were living in vehicles and we were all trying to sit around my tiny little phone without any volume. And so I just think it would be really cool to encourage people to maybe, you know, get groups to sit and participate in like a little group in their area. It would be so much fun because we were really having fun sitting and listening at the beginning before the clinic started. So I just thought it was something to encourage people to do because I didn't even think about that if I had had a Bluetooth and even my laptop out because I have a battery pack. I should have had it together because there were people that wanted to keep doing, but we just couldn't because of the clinic. So it's just a thought. I don't know, just a thought.
I think that's a great thought. That is
Yeah.
a great idea, and I would love that. We used to do I've done that stuff for years. I think that's a great idea, and maybe next year we could even have that as like a function. We could even have a group of people who are in different communities across the country are actually going out and doing street outreach to people who are on the streets and actually with a phone invite them in because they may not know about this event, and we'd love to invite more people in. Thank you, Peggy. That was just great. I noticed though that there was a hand raised, but it went down.
I'll throw something out. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
What about like maybe a list that could be published or of like tips and tricks for stealth camping or boondocking that help any of us or, you know, anyone to, I guess for a better word, to get away with it? You know, how do you do it in a way that's perhaps more low profile? And some of it would include, you know, the safe or the tactics Jamie and Jake came up with, but you know, maybe just a little bit more like, you know, how to be stealthy.
I have taken that down. I think that is another great topic. There have been a handful, maybe more than a handful, 2 handfuls of good topics for sessions that could either be within working groups or summit sessions. You know, we are, I think we would want to have a summit in 2023, and we will keep a growing list, and I'm adding that to it. Thank you very much.
And I also want to say that I think some of those conversations that we had this time, and I'll be the first to say I'm at fault of this, were led by people who aren't currently living in their vehicles. And I think we should change that for this next year. I would love to invite more people, all of you attendees who are here, who didn't have a chance to actually present, to propose your own presentations. If you would like to speak here, if there's something you would like to share about, please, please, please let us know. And we'd love to work with you in how to develop that as well, because that's what this is about. We want this conversation to be led by you all. Tim, you have your hand up.
Hi, yes, can you hear me? I put this in the chat and I discussed it with Tristia earlier, but as a suggestion, as we're drawing to a close here, I always have this urge to be like, how does this conversation keep going and not go silent? And also recognizing that we now have only a fairly small number of people here of all the people attended, I'd like to suggest that we at least start out with some kind of general list for registrants and participants to continue the conversation about what next. And we have a group that is set up that we can use. Now, there's different ways you could do this. We could, of course, invite people to sign up, but from experience, we know a lot of people won't see that, get that. So I would actually recommend that just add all registrants to it with very clear instructions about how to opt out. That would be actually much more inclusive. And then we can have you know, more voices represented about what different ideas people want for working groups or local groups, etc. So that's just a suggestion if you want to see what you think. Thanks.
I think it's a great suggestion. I know you've made it a couple times, Tim, and I think it's really good. So I think it's just a matter of making sure that everybody wants to share their information. But at the very least, we do have a listserv, as they're called, or basically an email list. So that we have been using to coordinate with. But you're talking about something a little different too. I think you're talking about actually sharing that information, though, right?
Well, just the mailing list that at least the ones I know of are for a planning group, and then service provider and lived experience groups. So they're sort of like working groups, but there isn't one that is that I know of that's just for everyone that would bridge across that or have announcements for what next.
Okay, that's a great idea. Super
Right.
easy to do.
Yeah, Tim, you're right. That doesn't exist right now. That should exist. One thing that I'm seeing in the chat is a few people talking about opt-ins. So, what I have in mind right now is as a way for us to generate that list is when we send out the information post-summit to everybody who is registered, we provide an opt-in option where people can opt in, share their information, and then that becomes the master list of folks that aren't broken out into working groups, so that everybody can be reached in one fell swoop. And we can talk about how to ensure that happens. But I think that concept is great and is something that we should have.
Just real quick, I just want to address Margot has raised a point many times over. Then I'm going to call on Steve and Karen, and we have about 10 minutes left, everyone. So just so you know, we're running out of time. Margot, you've raised the point about us working with Home on Wheels Alliance several times. I want to make sure you know you are heard. We're not ignoring what you're saying. We just can't speak to whether or not Howa is able to do that work. Now we've been talking with Howa, and we would like to continue that conversation. So just so you know, that is a conversation that we hope to have, and depending on how that all works out, we'll see how that goes. But yes, you are not being ignored. We hear exactly what you're saying. And part of that is about not developing a new 501c3 as a whole new process too. So wonderful. Stephen.
Yes. Addressing the tips suggestion, I just want to remind people that in some jurisdictions, conspiracy to commit a misdemeanor is a felony. And tips on avoiding being caught, probably you have to address each individual situation, but it's an area where we'd want to be cautious. There is a backside to this where there's no problem, and that's what tips do police officers use, such as looking at your valve stem position to see if you've moved, putting a piece of paper under your tire with their individual badge number and time marking to see if you've moved. There's a wealth of information I think we could share that as long as it's carefully parsed, not to be how to break the law, but what do they use to detect you, I think would be fine.
That's a great point, Stephen. And we could also add the quarter on the some people have had too on the tire when the quarter moves. That's another one. In Seattle recently, we developed, I talked about this earlier, a book, Ticketing in Seattle. Bill Curlin Hackett, who's still on here, they developed this with the SAPI group, where it actually goes through and it talks about, I know this is blurring out, but it talks about all the different laws that apply in Seattle around vehicle residency, how to avoid breaking those laws, who to contact when you get tickets, where the industrial zones are legally. So none of this, we developed this specifically so that it's not doing what you're talking about, Stephen, that it's not putting someone at risk of breaking the law, but showing what the laws are so that people do not break the laws. And this is the kind of information that I think could be really helpful in that place. Thank you again, Stephen. Karen.
Yeah, thank you so much for everybody who put in hours and hours of time into this. Thank you. I'm coming here via the kind of Howa arm. I saw the publicity via the Facebook groups and other announcements. It made me realize, and maybe this already happened, that for future summits and or for advertising the web resources that get produced from this, if if there are relationships or knowledges of safe parking programs, that they might push out, you know, a link to their car dwellers, that their clients that they already are working with, if they collect emails or texts or whatnot. It might just be a way of getting that big tent even bigger.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Exactly. And that's exactly what we want to be doing. I think that we're going to be, again, cross-pollinating. That was the idea. I know I keep using that term, but that's the idea, is bringing people with different information together to share that information, because I've heard from several people here that they had no idea that parking programs existed. And now we have parking program providers who are hearing from people to say, this is what we want out of our parking programs. I mean, that's the kind of information that really builds new networks and new programs. Bill Krillin-Hackett, who actually, for those who don't know, works with parking programs in Seattle and has for quite some time.
Yeah, thank you. I want to piggyback on the Red Book. You know, parking enforcement here gives that out. And we've heard a lot, and I know many of you have experienced a very savage police and parking enforcement where you live, but work hard to let them be your friends. We get calls from them to go help people. We get calls from Chris Wilkerson, who is one of the providers here who does the pump out. So there's a good share of them that don't want to see harm, and they call us to come do outreach. So try to foster that if you can.
Absolutely. And that's something that, you know, that it may sound counterintuitive, but you may find that parking enforcement, particularly the supervisors of parking enforcement, are very against ticketing of vehicle residents, because they know that these tickets are not helpful. They know that they often are unpaid, and they just force a person into economic ruin. And honestly, it causes trauma to the person who gets the ticket, as well as their employees, who have to constantly be giving these out to vulnerable people and harming them. So we've actually, in the work that we've done, we found that a lot of the supervisors in parking enforcement are pretty positive about finding another way.
So I'm going to pipe in to say this is exactly what I like about the collective, because in our conversations around criminalization today, a very different sentiment for very good reasons was expressed around relationships with police. And part of what I think is important about this really respectful communication that we have is that there is nobody's lying about their perspective and what their experience is. You know, people are talking from the experience that they have. And I think, you know, the ability to have those conversations as part of this collective can help inform the strategies that are going to be most useful for all of the individuals coming from that different perspective. So, you know, I appreciate that we're able to have conversations where we might really disagree, but do it in a respectful way, so that everybody has an opportunity to hear different tactics that might be helpful.
Absolutely. And I think that's so much about what we're doing here, is finding that common ground. I think that's where we've been able to see the success in I think in this summit and the work we're doing. And honestly, I think it gets to this conversation that's going on in the chat. It's an excellent conversation about vehicular homelessness, vehicle residency. What are we really talking about here? And it's about finding that common ground, right? That in the work that we've been doing in Washington State around that's fighting against tows and impounds and helping to protect people's vehicles. One of the things we found is that the tow companies, because of the work that we've done around the Homestead Act and the protection of a vehicle if it is declared as a residence, which answers one of the other questions that's popped up in chat, that people can actually defend their home if they declare it as a residence. That the tow companies now, they can't actually tow the vehicle because they can't sell it. And so in that way, we found common ground that they actually don't want to tow these vehicles now. So we've been able to work with them on how do we avoid people's vehicles being towed in the first place, so that whole process stops before it even starts.
Yeah, you know, and one other thing I'll say, just because, you know, I have so much respect for Bill, and I don't want to have the last thing that I say, you know, be like, we heard from people who disagree, but I would point out that the people who were disagreeing are vehicle residents who have had a very different experience with police. But I think there is a lane for Graham, Bill, and allies to have those conversations with police and leverage the lack of interest in enforcement of laws in a way that might be useful as a tactic for allies to engage in. And it might be, you know, different strategy that vehicle residents would be using as it relates to that. But it's important for us to push on all the levers because we're all working for that common interest in protecting the freedoms and dignity of vehicle residents.
Absolutely, absolutely. And everything I was just saying, I want to be clear, that's in Washington State. We can talk more about that. We actually, one of the sessions did talk about that. Ali Bilo from Columbia Legal Services talked about the work on that particular case and about the working group after that. So please go back and watch that video because we're almost out of time here. Or you can reach out to me directly. I can tell you about that. The way that the vehicle is declared as a residence is actually just saying it's a residence. You can have a sign in your window to declare it as residence. It's actually pretty simple. But again, that is in Washington State, not in necessarily in other places. So we have to be very, very clear on that. That said, it is now officially time. I don't want to keep anyone past this. You have all spent so many hours here, and I don't want to take. We don't want to take any more of your precious time. Thank you, thank you, thank you, everybody who attended. Thank you for your kind words, for your support, for helping us to build this and make it better. And thank you for joining us in 2023. We hope that you become part of this collective, that you help to continue to inform us on how to do this work better, on how to be better allies, on what the work that we need to do for you is. How do we better include vehicle residents in our communities across the country? How do we fight for the human rights for vehicle residents really across the world as we can? And really thank you everyone for attending. You made this dream come true.